Thank you, Pierluigi. Thank you, Katrin. Show of hands. I think who went to bed at 10 o'clock? 11? 12? 1? 2? 2? Any takers? No? Okay. They are still sleeping, right? Okay. So we have a session today. Perhaps next slide. We have a session today, and we will hope that it actually works. Daniel Hall will join us through Zoom. And here he is. I see him. Yes, perfect. So, thank you very much. So we have two guests here, Guillaume, Bazouin. Show of hands, Guillaume. Hello. Hello. And we also have Daniel Hall online. Then we have Konrad Nübel. Perhaps you stand up. Yeah. And we have Maria. Perhaps also stand up. Thank you. So, no, this is our session. So, of course, it's a little bit complicated. We would like to have an interactive session today. We will have fire starters. That means relatively short introductions in topics. And with these topics, we will join together and have a joint discussion also with you. So there will be some questions to start the discussion. And then we hope that we have a joint discussion, because the topic today is the new construction economy. Yeah? Construction is a very conservative method to deliver value to society, and as you know, everything is changing. Really everything. So Guillaume will talk about future trends in the next 5 minutes. Macroeconomics, geopolitics, the fourth industrial revolution, how AI will disrupt everything we are already experiencing. And now we are also interested how this will evolve in construction. So we are in very uncertain environments, and we would like to know how the construction economy will change over time. New construction economy or the economic outlook. Guillaume Bazouin, he's a partner from Brick and Mortar Ventures, just recently joined. I myself had the opportunity to speak with Darren Bechtel at the time. Ventures in construction are very rare, and here is a world-leading company showing us how it works. But I'm sure currently, considering the turmoil in California, in Silicon Valley, with Silicon Valley Bank, I'm very curious what we hear from Guillaume. Before that, you worked for Vinci, Vinci Group, same on innovation, foresight, and whether there could be any mergers and acquisitions. You have a master from Stanford in civil and environmental engineering. Interestingly, you also have a master in quantum and nuclear physics. So would be interesting, and that from Grenoble, would be interesting also to hear from you how this actually evolved and how this also benefited your deep understanding in technology, how it will shape the construction economy. So please, Guillaume, the stage is yours. 5 minutes, perhaps 6 minutes, and then we will return to the table and I will introduce the next speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So thank you very much for inviting me and for this wonderful introduction. I haven't had one this well done in a long time. As you said, Brick and Mortar is a venture fund that comes from California, focused on construction initially, the first one that was focused on construction. And I recently joined to be in charge of the expansion in Europe. I'm saying this here because it matters to the importance of Europe in this conversation. There were long thoughts in the firm whether to launch something in Asia or launch something in Europe. And the decision in terms of where the future of the world, that is our world of construction, was going to be invented, it was decided by this group of people that Europe was probably a better bet. And so I'm very excited to join you today and also to join this role. Just a focus on what we look at, because I think it also matters. We look at early stage investment globally in new materials, new construction methods, construction automation, robotics, digitization, productivity software, all that good stuff. And so to bring it to the subject of today, and where we see and where I see things shifting in the near future, there is one that I think will probably be one of the biggest drivers and happens to be centered in Europe. And it's everything that's connected to environmental regulations and carbon regulations at the European level and at the national level. I'm going to use an example that is often not well known outside of France, and I think it's a pity. It's a regulation called RE 2020 for the French lovers amongst you. It stands for Régulation Environnementale 2020. It was fought long and hard by the incumbents, so it didn't become the law in 2020, but in 2022. But to my understanding, it was the first law anywhere where, not in a city but at scale, you would have a hard limit on embodied carbon in new buildings that is a determinant to figure out whether you're going to have your building permit or not. So it's not a nice thing to have accolades or a few like stars in your buildings. It's something that enables you to build the building or not build it. In France, what it did when it passed is that it was a landslide because it didn't make a change for the few buildings that wanted to be examples. It lifted the bottom for everyone so that everybody has to account for carbon, but they also have to be under a certain limit. So if you think about it in terms of how it's changing the environment, it's forcing now the implementation of softwares and reports and all that stuff for carbon reporting, but it's also opening the door for circular economy material. It's opening the door for new materials, for cement alternatives, for timber, and so on. Similar things are happening in Denmark and in the Netherlands. I'm excited to see where, for instance, the DACH region is going to go on this. I haven't seen a lot, but I'd love to learn more. Another place where there's regulations moving is along waste management, and it's pushing the same things. It's forcing more transparency. It's forcing more tools to do the same work. And what it does is that it's very hard to keep doing the same work, doing everything that was done before and adding all these new regulation and elements. So one of the things that it's forcing and that we're excited about from an investment perspective is that it's forcing new digitization in a way that was not fully necessary before, and therefore opening the door for new tools. Another one that I know Daniel's going to be excited about is everything that's around the lines of labor shortage. It's something that's been plaguing the industry for a long time. I think it's something that will plague the industry a lot further in an environment where, if I again stay on the French example, there's not a million ways to decarbonize your buildings, and one of the ways is to move to timber. Well, if you've done concrete for 70 years and nobody knows how to do timber, it's unlikely that you're going to do all that good stuff at a very high level of precision on site. And so I think it's going to be a forcing function for the adoption of off-site and industrialized construction at a continental level. So that's another big shift that I'm excited to see in the future. I think I'm running out of time, so I will focus on the very last thing. When it comes to Europe and the rest of the world, Europe has a lot of work to do for everything that's connected to renovation. As we know, we're not going to build 1 million new cities. There's great companies doing that in Europe, and it's a great focus to have. But do keep in mind that I think that will be my closing statement for this opener, that it's not the case for the rest of the world. The floor area of Japan is going to need to be built every year between now and 2060. a place like Egypt is planning to build central planning, planning to build 20 more cities of more than 1 million people in the next few years. And our cute solutions for renovation, and I say this tongue-in-cheek, are great for us, but it's not the alpha and the omega of what we need to look at. And these people and like this part of the world needs to build, and we're not going to prevent them from building. So we should embrace it and find new technologies and new methods to help with that as well.
Thank you.
I hope I didn't go too long.
Oh, cool. Thank you very much, Guillaume, for your interesting insights, and there will be follow-up questions for sure. Daniel Hall. Daniel Hall is now professor at the Faculty of Architecture and Built Environment at TU Delft. Before that, he was at the ETH Zurich as chair of innovative and industrial construction. And I think you were able to move that long name forward to Delft, as I saw. Before that, you did your PhD at Stanford. And of course, your topics are around radical innovation, Industry 4.0 for the construction industry, new organizational and governance models using technology, and using autonomous agents. So your topic will be blockchain for the human-machine participation in economic systems. And we are really looking forward to that talk, and then we will discuss. Thank you. Please, Daniel.
Thank you very much. Mikhail, I hope you can see my screen and hear me well, because for some reason I lost my view of you, but I will carry on. Thank you for the very nice introduction. And there was a lot of things that I could talk about today, because as you heard from my biography, this is very much my field, which is new value creation and economic systems. But since we were here in the future of construction, I thought it would make sense to present, in my opinion, what's the most radical and futuristic work that we've done in the past on the research side. And so I'm going to present on our blockchain for human-machine participation in economic systems. Now you're probably worried because you're thinking, okay, it's only the second talk about economics and future of construction, and now someone's going to go tell me to buy cryptocurrency. But that's actually not really what my goal is here today. Instead, I think it's worthwhile that we go back to the starting point about what actually blockchain is. And that, very simply, it's a tool to transact digital assets peer-to-peer. Those assets can be cryptocurrency, but they can be other assets, other information. And the other important thing is that when we talk about making transactions peer-to-peer, the blockchain network doesn't care if that peer is another human or if it's a machine. And for me, that's what opened up a lot of interesting thoughts about human and machine participation. Because now, for the very first time, we see that blockchain enables humans and machines to participate together in economic systems. In other words, we have now a medium for exchange of value that is a currency that can be recognized both in the kind of human world and also in the machine world. It's a bit abstract, so let me take that a little more concrete for you. We could rethink the autonomous part of autonomous vehicles, and this was a first provocation from a think tank in Zurich called Decentrum that suggested, and we were thinking about this as well, we think about autonomous cars as a self-driving car, right? When we hear autonomous, the car can drive itself, but it's going to be run by Uber or by a corporation. But what would happen if we argued that that car can be autonomous in the sense of a self-owning car? On the blockchain, this is possible because, again, it has a wallet, it can hold the wallet, and it can hold funds, and customers can pay directly to the car and not necessarily need to have a central intermediary that would take some part of the profit. So the car can decide when it needs to fill up its fuel, it can decide when it needs to have maintenance, and then it can profit directly without having a rent-seeking intermediary. So based off of that idea, we went forward and created a prototype for a self-owning house. The name of the house is No One's One, so it stands for the fact that no one owns it. And we built a prototype, a solar-powered single-user meditation space, so where someone can go and have a moment of quietness and silence in the middle of the school day. It's a minimum viable prototype, very minimal functionality, low maintenance and modular construction. But the key points here is that it holds its own wallet on the Ethereum blockchain, and it self-operates through a cyber-physical sensing network. In that sense, we believe it's self-owning and self-operating at a very minimal proof of concept. I won't have time to get very far into the technical paper. At the end, I'll share some links to some scientific papers if you want to see it. But the basic idea is that we have a user who's going to interact with the front end, and that front end will then connect with the blockchain, which can trigger actions on the back end through a network of like Raspberry Pi and other small computational devices. Okay, so how does this work? What we look like here, here's a short video, which I hope will play. So here is on the front end, and it's not the perfect user interface, but just to show that we can have a user name where you can get a QR code. You could bring the QR code to the house, which will then, the QR code is basically your access rights. Then the house on the back end will recognize and check if everything's okay, that you have been granted that access right for that period of time. And then if the transaction is positive, then you go in, you have your 30 seconds or 30 minutes of meditation, and then you're able to step out of the house, and then the house goes back into listening mode, waiting for the next user to book time in the space. It's quite a simple idea. I don't want to argue that we've done anything that radical, but rather it's the idea that we can show and demonstrate this idea of sovereign machine agency. In other words, that machines, like the house, can be self-owning. We call this also engineered ownership, where we're engineering the concept of ownership. And this leads to the idea of blockchain-based autonomous agents. So now we say that things can hold funds and transact on the blockchain. They can make decisions, they can make transactions of value on the blockchain. This also eliminates the need for the rent-seeking intermediary between the user and the physical infrastructure. No longer can we say that the housing needs to have an owner, but maybe it can be that we remove this kind of profit-seeking mechanism and find new ways of transacting between humans and the house directly. And finally, I just want to end with some ideas about future applications of sovereign machine agency that we're starting to think about. And I'll do that along the lines of design, construction, operations. On the far end, there's been a lot of talk recently about regenerative systems. So the idea of not just sustainability, not just circular economy, but do we actually have regenerative systems that can improve our environmental impact and actually regrow, redistribute this. But the challenge for regenerative systems is that the theory is that if you really read literature on regenerative design, the theory is that we need to give agency both to buildings and to nature alongside of humans. One way to do that would be kind of everyone agrees that these things have agency, but I find that to be very difficult to imagine a future where as a society we just kind of collectively agree and make decisions on their behalf. The other way would be that we could encode agency through something like blockchain in order to create these regenerative systems. The second is the idea of human-machine co-production. We've all seen swarms of drones with 3D printing, or we have ideas of multi-agent systems, but typically these are done in their kind of own contained ecosystem where you're encoding incentives within the drones and the agents to make the production, the next production step. But what we don't have is a transaction between a machine and a human, right? And we can imagine this would be a very helpful transition state where we have robotics, we have humans, and we need to have a way to decide, how are we going to make a transaction? Should we pay the robot or we should pay the human for this task? And how do we determine that? And blockchain could be a potential medium to enable this kind of human-machine co-production. And finally, we have the idea of generative design, autonomous or design algorithms, a lot of things that you've been talking about yesterday as well. And here, I have a lot of skepticism that we're going to see a future where AI acts as a tool for the engineer. I think there's a lot of difficulty in thinking about the implications of black box and explainable AI. I imagine a possible alternative future, and maybe we could discuss this later, where these design algorithms could actually be given their own sovereign agency, in a sense. So the algorithms themselves can be placed on a public ledger, and they can be used as a public good. To me, this might solve some of the challenges we have around traceability, as well as finding ways to provide incentives for people to contribute to testing and building up of these algorithms. So in other words, we have a new incentive model for algorithmic design, AI, in the design space. I'll leave it there. If you are interested in the 2 papers about the No One's One, we have I have the QR codes here, as well as a YouTube video which goes a little bit more into depth on how it works. As with many professors, this is really, I get the privilege to present, but it's really the hard work of 2 researchers in particular, Hongyang and Jens, who have contributed with the work. And otherwise, thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion.